Hello and welcome to the Supernatural track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Martin, and today we are on season 14 road trip. Where did the boys go in season 14? Why were those cities picked by the writers? What might have been some of the reasons that those cities were chosen for stories? We'll discuss. But before we dive into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Kensing. I write contemporary and paranormal historical queer romance, and I've been a fan of Supernatural since the very beginning. I watched the first episodes, and I took a brief break sort of in the middle of the series, but then came back to it, fell down the rabbit hole, dabbled in some fanfic, and have been, a fan ever since.
Okay. Lola.
My name's Lola Lariscy. I'm a writer. I've been watching Supernatural since the beginning, and I finally got my website working, lolalarissy.com.
Very good. Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and editor, and this is going to start sounding like a broken record. I've been watching Supernatural since that very first episode aired.
Okay. Angelique.
Hi, I'm Angelique. I'm in New Zealand, and I'm going to break the broken record because I didn't discover Supernatural until 2016. And I was literally that person that they've done the meme about. I was a perfectly normal woman. And then that guy walked across the scene and said, Dad's on a hunting trip. And my life blew up. And this month I'm submitting my thesis on Dean Winchester.
There you go, as one does. And I'm Gail C. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. I fell in love with Supernatural in the middle of season 11, binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months so I could be ready for the start of season 12, started live tweeting the episodes, and went down the rabbit hole and have never hit bottom. Hope I never do. So it's just been a wonderful ride, and I'm going to run with this as long as I can. So season 14, we are starting to really get into a lot more of the Chuck arc, and we've got Jack, and we've got a lot of things going on. The boys went a lot of places. Where were some of the places that stuck out to you in season 14? Anna?
Oh, so the collectibles shop, the Smash Pow collectible shop in Salem, Ohio, man, I had some issues with season 14. There were some parts of it that I wasn't a fan of, but this episode was really fantastic. And I loved the shop. I loved everything about this episode. So there is a Salem, Ohio, and there is actually a collectible store in Salem, Ohio. It's called Totally Nostalgic Toycade. And Salem was founded by the Quakers and was, active in the abolitionist movement. It was a major hub on the Underground Railroad. So I don't know if those are the reasons why they picked it, but they did definitely pick a town in the Midwest that does have a action figure collectible comic book shop, which I think is pretty awesome. And it's just a really fantastic episode. So this is the episode where we get to, it opens with Dean watching movies and eating pizza with his noodle socks on, and Sam brings him, he's been sort of hanging out in his room because the bunker has gotten super crowded with all of the hunters and folks like refugees from Apocalypse World. So we spent a lot of time in season 14 in the bunker, but a lot of time the bunker is pretty crowded. And so this is Sam's effort to get Dean to sort of come back and, come back to the real world. He's shaved his grief beard. He brings Dean a case about Thundercat, a Thundercat, Panthro who's come to life and attacked the employee of a comic book shop. And it's just really a fantastic episode. So, and then it ends with the best dialogue interaction between the two of them, where Dean is talking about all the couples costumes that they should do in the next Halloween, from Bert and Ernie to Thelma and Louise.
Yeah, I love the curio shop. Isn't that the one where Dean bangs the ship off the shelf and Sam's like, don't touch anything? And then the comic book shop is hysterical. I mean,
and Dean is comparing one of the comic book shop owners to Sam, she's named Samantha, his name is Sam. She's got long flowing, soft hair. Sam has long flowing soft hair. And Sam's like, yeah, you're like the other guy who owns the shop. And Dean's like, I am not. But then they get into this like animated discussion about Hatchet Man and
no, All Souls Eve series, yeah. And Sam makes a homemade bomb out of a Scooby-Doo lunchbox. Yeah, it's just delicious.
It's just a great episode.
There are a couple other things in Salem, Ohio. There's a Crybaby Bridge at Egypt Road Bridge. There is a log house with a headless soldier. And there is a crossroads called Hell's Corners where hangings were held. So Salem lives up to its name's reputation.
Excellent.
And I can see why they picked it. Lola.
Well, I said earlier that, they wanted to hit everywhere in the Midwest. Well, every once in a while they leave the Midwest. And that makes me excited. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm not from the Midwest. So it's kind of like a shout out to Lola anytime they leave the Midwest. And in one episode, Ouroboros, they go to New Mexico. And, I like that they were really like recounting my life. I was obviously an inspiration for them, because in 1997, obviously they must have read something about my life and knew that in 1997, I went to New Mexico. And I traveled from the bottom of New Mexico all the way to the top because it was the 50th anniversary of the UFO landing in Roswell, New Mexico. So I was there. It was 4th of July weekend, not an American flag anywhere, just a bunch of like alien things and stuff. And I got all kinds of stuff. And so I was there. It was like something out of X-Files. It was crazy. People in costumes, and just really awesome. It actually kind of reminded me of the episode with Robert Picardo where it's supposed to be aliens. But anyways, and so I camped out and went all up and down New Mexico, all the way up to Santa Fe. So in this episode, they go throughout New Mexico, and I just love that they took a page out of my book. I'm really flattered.
Well, you should be. You totally should be.
Yeah.
How about you?
This afternoon I took a field trip. And I drove out to Pike Creek, Delaware, to see what Pike Creek really looked like. Okay. Google tells us that Pike Creek is a census-designated place in Newcastle County and is part of the Philadelphia, Camden, Wilmington, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland metropolitan statistical area.
That's
so that's
one area.
Just who should give a crap about this? It's a point on a map. There's almost nothing there except the Pipe Creek Bible School and a few developments, because Delaware is all about the development where you get to live inside everybody else's backyard. I found one development across the street from the Bible school that had houses that didn't look like they had maybe 4 or 5 bedrooms and would be a little bit too rich for Nick's little one child family, but they did look kind of upscale. I mean, there's no main street or shops or pretty much anything in Pike Creek, so they sort of missed the mark on this one, but they tried. The section of and it is, by the way, right next to Wilmington. You can pretty much call Pike Creek a suburb of Wilmington.
Delaware's not that big, so like there aren't that many places that aren't a suburb of Wilmington.
Well, it's a bedroom community for Wilmington. And at least the cafe they picked to represent Wilmington looked like someplace that could be in one of the seedier areas of Wilmington. So at least they get that. But yeah, I kept saying I was gonna do it. And I went to Pike Creek today. and
Well,
visit the home of the devil.
That is true dedication. We appreciate that. Yeah, true. Lucifer's first vessel, Nick. But you know, I did find out that there's supposed to be a headless Revolutionary War British soldier running around Pike Creek. And there's a tavern that theoretically was cursed by Edgar Allan Poe. And the fire department has an evil shadow. So there might not be much in Pike Creek, but
The whole fire
I
department?
wish I'd known. I bet the soldiers running around one of the big parks, because White Clay Creek Park is there, and also it abuts on Carousel Park, which is very large parks.
I think it said that it was the first battle of the Revolutionary War where the Stars and Stripes was flown. And
there's a lot of that kind of stuff in Delaware. There's a lot of battlegrounds, which is really awesome. And lots of those signposts that say a battle was fought here.
And Washington slept there. Yes.
Yes, there's a lot of that.
So you have it. Yeah, might be a spot on the map, but it's got some cred.
I was just gonna say I got a little bit of headcanon stuck in my ear. All right, so this is what I'm thinking. Now you went to that place today, right?
Yes.
But Nick was, scourged by Lucifer like what, 15, 20 years ago, something like that, we think. So what if it was like a thriving metropolis back then? Like it was gonna be like, I don't know, the next Wilmington. It was the Wilmington where Wilmington was the bedroom community. And then Lucifer came in and just like really bummed everyone out and just like kind of put a scourge on everything. And everyone was just like, why do we even bother? And it kind of went downhill from there.
Well, there goes the neighborhood.
It's not like there's a street full of empty stores is all. This whole state is organized in weird developments. And the organization, they sell maps of Delaware by development. It's a very strange state. Not like any other one I've ever been in, and I've been in a few.
That's odd. Angelique, what did you find, or what watching this with New Zealand eyes, what just hits you as that was weird?
So nothing particularly hit me as weird, but one thing that I did notice was whenever we saw Dean as Michael, the settings and the geography were really quite different to what we would expect to see Dean in. So yeah, we had him in Michael's clothes, but we never saw Michael when he was first in the series. We see him in very different surroundings, and I think that was, they're very urban, they're very upmarket, and they fit with that whole aura that Michael has that is so different to Dean Winchester, and hats off to Jensen. But it really stuck out to me that it wasn't just his acting or his clothes. These were not Dean Winchester spaces. These were not parts of the landscape Dean Winchester would go to voluntarily. Apart from that, the one that I liked the most, the setting I liked the most, and this is really corny, and you're not allowed to throw things at me, was for the Lebanon episode, because they made the bunker so much more than what it was for that episode. There was such a close feeling. I mean, it's a big rambling kind of construction, but in all those scenes where they're together as a family, there's this really cozy, closed in, it's all filmed in very tight and very muted lighting, and you get that feeling of family. Whereas when they pulled back and John's gone back and everything, you're back to that big area of we all rattle around in here kind of space. And I thought that was actually a really good use of a location that's not really a location. It's kind of a backdroppy thing but they made it something very, very special just for those few minutes. That really added to the, yes, corny, but very much the pathos of the episode.
We also got some looks at the town of Lebanon, which we didn't very.
Yeah.
So the liquor store, the Italian restaurant. We
and
got
the relationships between the boys and those people,
Mhm.
especially with the woman in the post office, who, for whatever reason, does not like Sam, but definitely likes Dean. I mean, you know.
And the bar, right? The bar that the
Yeah.
Campbell brothers frequent,
Yeah.
right? So they walk into the bar and, you know, they're known, oh, it's the Campbell brothers. And so, you
Yeah.
know, like they've adopted the last name Campbell in Lebanon when they're
Yeah.
like out and about in town, you know, Mary's last name. So yeah, I really appreciated that we got a lot more of Lebanon and the way that the people who live in Lebanon see Sam and Dean, you know, the kids outside the library or the school or whatever it was who were like, you know, talking trash about them and who stole Dean's car. It was really great to see some more parts of Lebanon.
And they certainly balanced out some of the things that I had issues with in the episode, but you know, I thought the setting was really good, and it was one of the best uses of the bunker.
Well, one of my favorite places isn't real, but it was a lot of fun in the episode, and that's Charming Acres, Arkansas. And don't drink the milkshakes. You know, this show has something milkshakes because
those milkshakes were good.
It's the milkshakes
They
at
were
the
the best.
And then, you know, Mrs. Butters takes away Jack's powers with milkshakes. So I'm suspicious now of milkshakes. But yeah, the adorable little stuck in 1950s town with everything just perfect unless you disagree and then your head explodes. Right. So sad, too bad. But that town was just really cute and you know, the whole concept was creepy, and we were definitely getting a Twilight Zone vibe as we went through that. But I loved the way they recreated the diner and like the perfect bewitched kind of 1960s house with Sam in his little sweater and
his
glasses, and you know, his wife being the perfect sitcom wife. And so Charming Acres was quite charming until, you know, it wasn't.
As those places often turn out not to be.
Yes. Back to you, Anna. What's your next pick?
So my next pick is also a not real place, but figured large in the season, and that's Rocky's Bar, right? The place in Dean's subconscious created by Michael as a means to keep Dean quiet and compliant while Michael was possessing him. So and then, you know, Dean uses the storeroom in Rocky's Bar as sort of the new cage to contain Lucifer when, you know, later in the season. So, but it's just like, it's just the most quintessentially Dean place that ever was a Dean place. So Angelique talks about how all of the places that Michael was in when he was in control were none of the places that Dean would be in. And this is the most Dean place that anybody could ever come up with. And so, I mean, Michael knows his vessel, right? So obviously the name is a reference to Crowley calling him Moose, or calling Sam Moose, but you know, like the squirrel and moose and the whole thing, and Rocky and Bullwinkle. So there's a stuffed squirrel wearing an aviator's cap and goggles in the bar, as Rocky does in the Rocky and Bullwinkle. There's actually there's a graffiti, Daphne Loves Fred, carved on the inside of a heart on the bar in Rockies, right? So call back to the Scooby-Doo crossover episode. And then there's some beers there's the like Margie Kugel's beers, which is the beer brand that is in Supernatural throughout the entire season, that's made up. And I forget who Margie is, but she's like the wife of somebody, and the beer is named after her, somebody who's involved in the show. But there's also coasters from Jensen's beer company, the family beer company, a family business beer company, and some of the particular types of beer that the family business beer company make are also like in this bar. So there's so many callbacks. There's an Impala tribute behind the bar. There's 2 pictures of the Impala. There's the license plate from the beginning of the show. There's a Texas Star neon sign. There's a cassette deck and a pool table. There's a wooden monkey behind the bar that originally was at the Harvell's Roadhouse. It's just like so many. And then in the bar office, there's also a Busty Asian Beauties calendar. Like, it's just like filled with callbacks to previous episodes of the show and filled with things that are either directly connected to Dean's identity or that Dean loves so much. So, and we're in this episode, we're in this bar in multiple episodes, right? We spend a fair bit of time there in episode 10, but there's flashbacks to it in episode 9, and then other flashbacks in 11 and 12 and 14 Ouroboros that Lola mentioned earlier. So that was really one of my favorite places, even if it didn't exist for real in season 14.
I like to think that if Dean hadn't been a hunter, that maybe that's the bar he would have built up with all the money he made fixing cars.
Well,
Yeah, I think that's entirely possible.
Job would have been for him to come up with that bar, and just Sam could bartend and he could just sit in the office and look at dirty magazines.
Well, and that monkey statue shows up again in heaven outside Harvell's Roadhouse next to Bobby on a little table, where they put the beers. So that monkey statue has shown up so many times throughout the show. I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of those items that the boys either took home with them or is sitting in that storage locker in Vancouver where they stashed a lot of stuff that they got from the props.
Isn't there something weird with monkey gods, Asian monkey gods?
They're tricksters.
Yeah. It may be moving itself from place to place.
Well, that could be. That could be. Well, and I thought it was very interesting in that episode that Pamela is part of that bar fantasy. Cass and Sam are off hunting. So oddly enough, Dean has retired from hunting, but Sam is still hunting. But Pamela's there. It was a very interesting, setting.
Yeah. Yeah, and they flirt and, they tease each other and they're just, they just have this delightful relationship. But yeah, like it is interesting that of all the people from who, has passed on in the previous seasons, that it's Pamela who comes back in this sort of milieu. I mean, Pamela fits, right? Like she totally fits well in, and the two of them always had kind of a,
there's regret.
Yeah. She also
about what happened to her was his fault.
Yeah. Yes, but there's also like the candidates that Dean feels regret about, right? Like that list is long, right? Like for Pamela to sort of like filter up to the top of that list is interesting.
Well, there was always that tension between them. So
yeah, and she is the one who suggested a threesome.
She did.
So
you are not invited, Grumpy.
That's right. You are not invited. Unlike Annie, who, took her Winchester sequentially. Lots of foxholes.
What was that before or after Bobby?
Yeah, well.
Was that before? That was,
I think
that was after. Both. That was after Bobby, I think, right?
Or I think it was both, as it turned out.
Well, Pamela would have been like before they really knew Bobby, right? Before they were real close.
I think so, but didn't Annie?
Bobby introduced them to Pamela rather.
Oh, okay.
But didn't Annie also like have all Bobby, Sam, and Dean?
Yeah.
Foxholes.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know the order of Pamela, not of Pam. I don't know the order of Annie having Bobby and Sam and Dean.
Foxholes.
Yes. All right, Lola, what's your next one?
I rewatched Nightmare Logic today, and this is the one they're going to Claremont, Oklahoma, and there's this really creepy house with a cemetery, and they're there because Maggie, they finally got into the tech age and they've got body cams on the hunters, which I think is pretty cool. And instead of having to spend a day going around going, have you seen this girl? I'm with the FBI. They can just look at the camera footage and see, oh, this is what happened. It looks like a ghoul or something. Well, we need to go there. So they go there, and this place looks like something out of Buffy. This thing is crazy. I mean, it's like, I don't know if it had the wrought iron fences, but it looked like it should have the wrought iron fences with the, beware ye who enter. And there's an actual private cemetery on the property. And I was just fascinated by that. I mean, to us, a cemetery is a place you go to, and you go there for a few minutes, and you're like, oh, all these people, and they're in the ground. That's so weird. And then you go to lunch at Applebee's, and that's the way we do it. But these people, there's no lunch at Applebee's. They just look out their window, and it's all there every day. Middle of the night, it's like, oh, and you hear a bird or something, you're like, I hope that's a bird. It's part of the everyday. And could you imagine how that must color you? It must be so strange. It would be just very aware of death all the time. And it's an old mansion, and it's really creepy. And I just love that setting.
Okay.
Claremore, Oklahoma itself, is, you know what? I bet it does have an Applebee's, right?
I bet it does.
It's 30 miles away from Tulsa, right? It's apparently the most famous for being the home of Will Rogers. It has a museum and a hotel named after him. So I don't know, maybe Gail has found more, paranormal or scary activity in Claremore, but when I was looking into it, it seems completely normal and totally the place that would absolutely have an Applebee's that you could go to after you go to the cemetery.
Yeah.
This place.
Note that it's the middle of Oklahoma, and yet somehow Sam and Dean ran into Mary and Bobby in the middle of Oklahoma with no pre-planning.
But there's a lot of places, they go to Oklahoma and different towns in Oklahoma, kind of on the reg, because Kansas is on, just over the border. Kansas and Oklahoma are, adjacent states. And so, and there's a lot that happens in Oklahoma over 15 seasons of Supernatural. So I can imagine that Sam and Dean could be in one part of Oklahoma, and Mary and Bobby could be in another part of Oklahoma.
Now I rewatched it today, so it's fresh in my mind. I'm not a genius, but they said Bobby and Mary said that Maggie had been texting them the whole time because they were giving her pointers on hunting. And so they knew where she was, and she stopped replying to their text. So that's how they got there. And of course, Sam is the new Bobby, and he's running everybody, so he knew where they were. So they were all worried about Maggie with reason.
Well, Claremont also has the Belvedere Mansion, which is another big, beautiful home with a tragic history. Nothing that unusual of, very rich person builds a house and then dies of a heart attack before it's finished and has a tragic, end. But it is supposed to be haunted. There's a haunted hospital, and there is a haunted college radio station. Now, I worked college radio in college. It was in the basement of a building. Even we didn't have a ghost. So, I'm kind of jealous that this college radio station has its own ghost, because we didn't have a ghost.
I know what's going to happen with that college radio station. The ghost wants to play It's the End of the World as We Know It on a loop 24 hours a day.
And the DJs are like, no.
It causes all the students to go crazy. And yeah, because it would anybody. I love REM, but that song drove me crazy.
You might be onto something there. Elektra, what strikes your fancy?
One of the places that we spent a brief visit in was, we meet Sergei this season, and we actually spent some time in Sergei's trailer, which I think is an old Airstream out in the woods. And it's just we get a viewpoint into his mind about how Yeah, I take favors from everybody and they give me favors back. And I don't need very much because all I do is I live in this trailer in the woods. And how the heck did you get here? Because nobody knows where I actually am. And it was just the whole thing. He just lives in a trailer alone out in the woods. He's that guy.
Sergey was an interesting guy.
Oh, yeah.
How about you, Angelique?
One of the ones I really liked, and I don't know where the location is because Kiwi, is the episode where Jack takes Dean hunting. He thinks he's found a case and he talks Dean into going with him. And Sam is off with Charlie. And sorry, I've been racing around all morning and my brain's a bit mushy, but it's is it True Love? She's trying to find the librarian. And so Jack and Dean have this whole bonding thing around this kind of normal everyday stuff that young people go through that's gone horribly wrong. And Jack's trying to prove himself to his mentor, and Dean's going, what the I am nobody's mentor kind of thing. And I thought that was quite a neat backdrop for it, because under different circumstances, it's probably what Jack might have grown up with. You know, small town and boy meets girl, yada, yada, yada. But here he is, and his voice of experience is Teen Winchester, which on the best of days is probably dodgy. And trying to fit into this world that he really isn't equipped in any manner to be a part of. You know, he's been not wanted and pushed and shoved, and what's he supposed to do, and what's going to happen to him, and is he bad, is he good, yada, yada, yada. I thought that was a great episode, and I thought it was a really nice setting, that the setting didn't overtake the story. It was right to have him against this very, very normal thing that just somehow had gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one who had to convince them that there actually was something wrong.
Yeah. One of the other places they visited was McCook, Nebraska. And here we are back out again in the middle of nowhere. But what I did find there was they have a place called Devil's Canyon. Of course they do, which had a murder. Of course it did. And the ghosts come from that murder. So it is a town that has been touched a little bit, at least, by darkness and stories about ghosts and murders. So, you know, I find it interesting when you go to the websites that list like all the haunted places in a state, and you start scrolling down, and you know, obviously bigger places usually have more of them, but then you find these little places like McCook that still makes the list.
They also have a Frank Lloyd Wright designed house there, and something called the Museum of the High Plains, which sounds fascinating. So yeah.
Who knew? Yeah. Back to you, Anna. What's your next pick?
So like we've kind of touched on most of my, like, you know, favorite locations in this particular season, because I feel like this season they traveled around a whole lot less, right? We spent a lot of time in Lebanon. We spent a lot of time in the bunker. We spent a lot of time, you know, sort of like trying to figure out what the hell to do with Michael and Dean and whatever. But we did get to Hibbing, Minnesota a couple times, right? Where Donna, the Sheriff Donna lives, in episode 11, Damaged Goods, and in episode 12, Profit and Loss. And then in the Profit and Loss episode, in Hibbing, we were at some unnamed motel, and then the Happy Days nursing home where Donatello was staying, you know, for a while in room 101. So it's always nice when we get back to the locations that we're familiar with. So, and also to, you know, see our friends, and we get to Sioux Falls as well, at least once, where we catch up with Sheriff Jody Mills, and you know, catch up with the, you know, the girls that she is you know, taken care of, being a mother figure too. So yeah, so it's nice to get back to some of our old familiar, you know, stomping grounds.
Okay. Lola, how about you?
All right, so this one has like a personal connection. There's one episode called Damaged Goods, and they go to Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Apparently there's like a storage space there, something it has to do with Nick. Anyways, this has a personal connection because my best friend in 8th grade was from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And there was a mystery that I was unable to solve for an entire year until like right before she moved away. Now, Angelique may not know what I'm talking about, but some of y'all will. For a year, I would spend the night at her house, like almost every weekend, and we would, you know, just have fun, play Madonna and stuff. And every once in a while, she would ask me, would you like some pop? And I would look at her, and I guess I was too young to know to ask, what are you talking about? So I would just say no. Because I'm like, what, Pop Rocks? I didn't know what she was talking about. And she would say it like every weekend, and I'm like, what? And then like one of the, like maybe the last weekend before she moved, she was like, do you want anything to drink? And I said, I'd like some Coke. And she said, I ask you that every weekend and you never want any. And I'm like, what? And there's a lot of who's on first, who's on second before we finally figured out that, yeah, she'd been asking me if I wanted soda that whole time. And she's from Michigan and I'm not. And now I know.
I had this experience too, because I was born in Maryland and I spent my early years in El Paso, Texas, but my parents are both from Maryland. And so we called it soda when I was growing up. And then when I was about 8 or 9 or so, we moved to Detroit. And yeah, I was like, Pop, what are you talking about?
I don't want to go pop. I'm not a balloon. What are you asking me? A solid year.
Of course, if you go to Atlanta, everything's Coke.
Well, and that's a Southern thing. Everything is Coke, whether it's Pepsi or Dr. Pepper or whatever. So I used to say Coke all the time, but it would confuse all my Northern friends. And they're delicate and I don't want to confuse them. So I switched to soda. So I started saying soda. So I say soda.
Okay.
But pop. And that confuses everybody. I don't care if you're in Oregon or Texas or Delaware, wherever. We're just like, what are you Michigan people talking about? Go back.
Okay. Elektra.
I'm not sure how to follow that up. I do want to remember we do spend some time up in heaven. Beautiful, beautiful heaven with its, you know, diminishing supply of angels this season. And we get our first look at the empty. Our very first look at the empty. And, you know, the very frightening look at the empty. And we're starting to understand some of the more bigger cosmic things at play, the cosmic forces involved in this.
Yeah.
You know, it's so close to home. Hey, you know, I can drive. It's a half-hour drive to go up to Pipe Creek, but I still can't figure out where that damn sandbox is. No matter where I look.
How about you, Angelique? What struck you?
Yeah, I too, I think I've touched on the ones that really stood out to me. I thought the whole season was, it was kind of disturbing, and I don't mean that in a sense of oh, I didn't like what they did with this, but it had a really uneasy feel. You know, part of it was we knew what we were coming into with season 15, but the build up that, you know, you've seen nothing yet, guys. This has been bad. It's going to get worse. And it felt like that whole season, wherever they went, whatever they did, it just got incrementally more unsettling, is probably a better word than disturbing. It just, you know, what is going to happen here? What are we going to be hit with? What is coming? Because this is so you know, got under my skin. And the moment when Dean is making the box and they're arguing over, does he go in it? Does Jack go in it? Does he go in it? What do they do? I remember sitting because my daughter watches it with me, because it's her fault that I got involved in Supernatural. And we were just sitting there with glasses of tequila going, oh my God, what? And it felt like it was that every episode. And at the end of the season, it was like, oh, season 15 is going to be bad. This is not going to be good. We're going to need way more tequila. I thought it was very cool in a, guys, did you have to really do that to me kind of way, that they managed to do that. It just never lets up. There are some episodes that I wasn't that fussed on, some where I had some issues around what they did, particularly in Lebanon, which was also an episode I really liked. But consistently, they left me feeling like something really bad is coming, something that we are not going to like, and something that is just going to turn everything upside down. And it so did. You know, it was just that really unsettling, oh wow, what's happening here? Something's not right.
Yeah, absolutely. They did a great job with that. I found a few other things. In Memphis, Tennessee, of course, the famous Orpheum Theater is haunted by the ghost of a 12-year-old girl, and I think there are 6 other ghosts that regularly haunt that. There was a jumper from the Starrick building who, poor guy, jumped off the building, never left. And then there's, of course, a haunted mansion, because it's Memphis, and of course you have to have a haunted mansion. In Joplin, Missouri, there's another haunted theater, and there are spook lights. There was a massacre, so they're in a shootout with Bonnie and Clyde, so all of that contributes to the ghost population. In Montauk, New York, there is a lighthouse haunted by the spirit of a drowned girl, and there is another haunted Montauk Manor, which sounds like it ought to be something out of a Scooby-Doo episode. And in Polk City, Iowa, they have a smelly ghost. That's what he's called, the smelly ghost. So there you go.
What does he smell like?
Horses, apparently.
Okay, that's smelly.
Day with that.
No, I'm sorry, kerosene. He smells like kerosene, but they do have an old horse armory that has horse noises, ghost horses. And then there was a mall that is reputed to be haunted because it was built on the foundation of an old abandoned monastery. Don't people ever watch horror movies? Don't they know this never goes well?
And whatever you do, don't move the bodies. If it's a cemetery, or I mean, do move the bodies. I'm sorry, do move the bodies, or don't build something over the bodies, for God's sake.
They never learn. And then there was Fort Dodge, Iowa, that also had a place called Terror Bridge, as well as a haunted theater, because everybody should have a haunted theater.
Yeah.
Well, we have blown through our time. Any last comments or places we failed to mention? Last call.
There's that one last cemetery. That's a really nice cemetery.
Which one?
The one where they have the final confrontation at the end of the season.
Oh yeah. And there's that
cemetery. It's got a gorgeous mausoleum.
Yeah.
I run
and
around that cemeteries. I can tell you that's a nice one.
That was a very pretty one. It had a lot of statuary and iron fences that were handy to use to bash ghosts.
Yeah, and there's that dilapidated church and in Duluth, Minnesota, right, where Michael, when he was still occupying Dean as a vessel, was like torturing monsters and you know, like trying to turn them into, you know, uber monsters. And Sister Joe had a church. She was like operating in a church in Duluth, where she's like healing the sick and buying her Prada and her Louis Vuitton, and you know, sort of taking people for whatever she can. So yeah.
And they covered a lot of territory. Well, folks, as usual, we have blown through our time. So thank you so much for being here. But before we close, let's give everyone a chance to say where we can find you online. Anna?
You can find me at annakensing.com on most of the social media places, although my presence waxes and wanes depending on how much I'm procrastinating writing. And then also on TikTok at Anna Kensing Books.
Very good. Lola?
My name's Lola Lariscy. I finally got my website fixed, lolalarissy.com. And one day I'll finish my second book. I'm on like the 20th draft. And every time I start reading it again, I find something else that I messed up and I have to fix that. So hopefully before I die, I'm going to finish my second book.
The way the business goes. Yep. Welcome to the club. Elektra?
You can find anything you need to know about me at untilmidnight.com, and I'm on Mastodon at Elektra at Wandering Shop.
Okay. Angelique?
You can find me at angeliquejurd.com, and I'm on most of the social media spaces, including TikTok.
I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. All the social media sites are a variation of those names, so if you spell them right, you'll find me. I run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook, and I'm a columnist for the Winchester Family Business blog, but most of the time I'm here on Continual. So thank you all so much for being here. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up soon, so we'll see you online.